Senator Paul.
I want to thank the panel for coming today and expressing your opinions. I would like to know a fairly direct response, though, whether or not you think the military takeover in Egypt was a coup or not a coup.
By a legal definition, I would say it's pretty hard to say that's not a coup.
Okay.
Yes, Senator, I believe it was a coup. It had a lot of popular support, but that is often the case with military coups. That's not unique to this case.
Well, just so we have one point of difference, I would hesitate to call it a coup because the military has not taken power. They continue to stand behind the seat of power, but they have made it clear through the roadmap that they issued and then their actions since then that they want to see the restoration of a civilian government.
Well, the reason this is important is because our law says that when a coup occurs, the aid ends. So we can debate whether it's a good idea to end, and you're welcome to have opinions on whether it's a good idea to have aid or not to have aid, but the law is the law. And if we decide that we're above the law, it's very hard for us to be preaching to the rest of the world about having the rule of law. So I think this seriously undermines our standing in the world, and it seriously goes against anyone who claims that they're for the rule of law. But I would go one step further. Even if you say this is not a coup because the military is not, there's not a general currently running it, I think that's, semantics and really not going to the point of this, because our law says basically if the military had a substantial involvement in replacing a democratically elected government. So it doesn't matter, according to our law, whether there's a general in charge or not. But putting a president who's been elected under house arrest, we don't know where some of these people are. I mean, this is the definition of the kind of thing that we're supposedly opposed to. And I was no great fan of the Muslim Brotherhood. I wasn't for aiding the Muslim Brotherhood either. But the thing is if we're not going to obey the law, if we're simply going to say that we bring a panel before us that says aid's a good idea, realize that if you're telling us that the aid should continue, you're telling us to flout the law. You're telling us that the law is not important and that basically we can decide the benefits or the detriments of whether or not to continue aid are more important than the law. And to my mind, you can't, if you are, you're rising to a level where you say you're above everything what we stand for. If the president's not going to adhere to the rule of law, if he's going to say that he creates the law, we so damage our standing in the world, we so damage what we stand for that we have no moral basis for going around the world or telling anybody anything. There's a huge argument we can have about whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. I personally think that if we think we're buying the goodwill of the Egyptian people, when they're being doused with tear gas that was made in Pennsylvania, paid for with U.S. taxpayer dollars, I don't think they're jumping up and down and saying, "Yay, America." So I would say that I think that foreign aid has often gone to criminals, it's often gone to plutocrats, it's often gone to dictators, it's often gone into the pockets of one plutocrat who then goes and fills up a Louis Vuitton bag full of cash and goes and spends it in Paris. And it's obscene. And I think for us to be defending aid to Egypt when we've given $60 billion of it to the Mubarak family, who were basically thieves and stole it and used it for their own personal aggrandizement. You look at Mobutu and his family. You look at the history of foreign aid. You look at the history of thievery and thuggery and people who have taken the money and used it for their own personal benefit. And then we're going to come here and say one versus the other. I truly fear that even out of the military establishment, which everybody says is so much more pro-Western, that what we're going to get out of the military establishment, or what we could get, is someone who rises up and becomes a strong man and says, "I'll correct this chaos in Egypt and I'll do it, but I'll do it through the strength of being a general that'll do whatever I want." And maybe whatever I want means reclaiming lands that we say Israel's taken from us, or that maybe someday our weapons are used. But I think it's absolutely chaos over there. And to be sending planes and tanks into this chaos, but above and beyond all the debate really is, are we going to obey the law? I don't think really, other than some objections, there are serious people out there saying this is not a coup. To define this as not a coup is not to have an intelligent debate from my point of view. But I would love to see or hear if there is a justification for breaking the law. Because if this is a coup and you want to continue aid, you're basically arguing for breaking the law.
Senator, since I was the one who refused to call it a coup. Let me take the first crack at responding. And I would respond to 2 points you made. First, on the question of foreign aid, which is a different issue from what we're talking about. Perhaps this requires a longer discussion, but I think we can be proud of the billions of dollars of aid that we provided to Egypt, both military and economic. We helped build a country that was largely broken.
Including what Mubarak stole?
I think it has yet to be determined that Mubarak stole our money.
And how would you respond to the fact that al-Sisi, who is from the military, is the assistant prime minister or the deputy prime minister? That to me sounds like the military is involved in the government.
That's the second part of the question. On the first part, I'd be happy to discuss further what our aid did accomplish over the years, and it accomplished a great deal. On the second part of the question, the system that existed under Morsi provided no outlet, no legal outlet to remove the president, because the court had suspended the People's Assembly, their parliament, which would have been the avenue to pursue a rule of law methodology for removing the president. And therefore, when the military did intervene, it was intervening on the basis of what it defined as a popular will. Whatever it was, 10, 15, 20 million people who had not only signed a petition, but who had put their address down and their identity card number, who had gone on the streets and who had made clear that they wanted to see a change. Now, again, I don't think it's a question, it's a black and white question.
Hundreds of thousands of people have signed petitions against Obamacare. Do you think if the generals take over the White House here and we get rid of Obamacare through force, would that be a coup?
Senator, fortunately, we have a system which allows for a rule of law methodology for holding a president accountable. And we've used that in our history. Egypt, during the year of Morsi's governance, did not have that methodology. And that's why this is a question mark. I don't think it's a black and white question, frankly.
Thank you.